Borthakur IAS Academy প্রস্তুতি আৰু অধ্যয়নৰ নিৰ্ভৰযোগ্য ঠিকনা Borthakur IAS Academy.
Hello everyone, this is Funny. Welcome to Borthakur IAS Academy. This is our daily Hindu analysis class for 17th September 2021. Today we have two good articles, one on Indian economy and one on international relation. Let us begin with the first article for today. So the first article for today is government sets up bad bank to clear the NPMS. This is significant, right? This article or this bit of news has been in circulation for the last 1 year. It was announced last year. There is a greater possibility, there is a greater chance that a question might be expected in both prelims and in mains regarding NPAs or bad loans. So you can expect a question in this regard. So before going into the article itself, before discussing the details how the bad bank works and all this details, first let us understand what non-performing assets are. So what are NPAs? NPAs are nothing but what a bank does is usually when there is a commercial loan and it hasn't been paid for 90 days or there is an overdue of 90 days, then the bank usually classifies those loans as non-performing assets. It is 90 days when it is a commercial loan. Similarly, if the loan that has been overdue is a consumer loan, the time limit is 180 days. To repeat again, when it is a commercial loan and it has been overdue for 90 days, the bank then can classify that commercial loan as a non-performing asset. And if the case is with a consumer loan, if the overdue is more than 180 days, if it is 180 days overdue, then the bank can notify it or classify it as non-performing asset. So this is with commercial loans and consumer loans. What about agriculture loans? In the case of agriculture loans, if the interest or the installment or principal remains overdue for more than 2 harvest seasons, then it is declared as NPAs. Remember, the period should not exceed more than 2 years, right? The harvest seasons is given as 2, overdue for 2 harvest seasons, but the time period should not exceed 2 years. Now this is what you term as NPAs or non-performing assets. To simplify, for commercial loans, if a loan is overdue more than 90 days, it is classifiable as non-performing asset by the bank. If it is a consumer loan, 180 days. If it is an agricultural loan, where not only the interest, if the installment or the principal amount remains overdue for 2 harvest seasons, then it can be declared as non-performing asset. Now, in order to make things a little bit clear, these NPAs are further subdivided or categorized into 3 types. One is a substandard NPA, doubtful NPA. The third is loss assets. What is substandard NPA or what is substandard? When the NPAs have aged less than or equal to 12 months, then it is termed as a substandard NPA. Then it becomes a bad loan. What is doubtful? When the NPAs have aged greater than 12 months, more than 1 year, then it is termed as an doubtful NPA asset. What is the third one? Loss assets. When the bank or its auditors, they identify it as a loss, meaning there is no time frame after exceeding more than 12 months. After doubtful, if the bank itself or its auditors feel that we are not going to recover this money from these people, then they identify it as a loss, but it is not yet written off. They identify it as a loss, but it is not written off. That is what loss assets is. And these are the 3 subcategories of NPAs that we need to be aware of to understand what the bad loan or the bad bank tries to address in this scenario. So why are NPAs a worry for our country, for our banking sector? See, the level of NPAs have been incrementally increasing 2008-2009 financial crisis. The number and the percentage of NPAs rose drastically since 2016. Now what has been happening was that we experienced a global shock, financial shock in the global financial crisis of 2008 and 2009. But RBI has been recognizing bad loans on their book. See, they started seeing this resulting in large number of or large percentage of NPAs in the banks in India since 2016, particularly, where we have the number of NPAs shot up drastically. Now, RBI was asking banks to make their NPAs clear, meaning write your bad loans on your books, identify them, and ensure that you make us aware of your percentage of NPAs. Now, why it is a worry for Indian economy or from a taxpayer's perspective? The biggest worry is that the highest percentage of NPAs were in public sector banks. What are public sector banks? Which were owned by the government of India. In essence, what was happening was most of the public sector banks had or were owing overwhelming portion of NPAs in our banking sector. Now, to address this NPA issue, what the government has been doing with the public sector banks was they were trying to recapitalize them. They were using tax money and they were trying to infuse that money into these struggling public sector banks. In a way, what was happening was these banks had NPAs, the government was collecting tax from us, and they were infusing that or introducing that money into these struggling banks so that they can recapitalize them. So the idea was that they were going to improve the financial health of PSBs by infusing tax money into this, and so that they could carry on their functions and they could lend out loans and they could kickstart the cycle of economic activity. But the results were opposite to what the government was expecting. The government was infusing money, hoping that these banks would recover their health, their healthy financial status, but again, the situation kept deteriorating. As the situation was getting bad, there was arguments that were being made that there was a need to create a bad bank. Now, what is a bad bank? Bad bank is simply an asset regularization or stress relieving mechanism that would allow to reduce the stress or stress of NPAs on both public sector banks and commercial banks. So idea is that this bad bank will act as an institution where banks who have bad assets, they can bring those assets into this bad bank, and the bad bank will do the deed that commercial bank or the public sector bank cannot do. They'll try to sell these stressed assets, meaning this would essentially free up banks from doing that job, so they can resume their normal commercial duties. On one side, you will have the bank functioning as usual, but on the other side, you will have the bad bank that these commercial banks have brought their stressed assets to, which would do their bidding and try to sell off those assets. That is what, in a nutshell, what a bad bank would be. Now let us understand what Indian government is trying to do in terms of this bad bank mechanism. Now, this is our finance minister announced the bad bank, or this was one of the key announcements that were made during the budget, right? We announced the formation of India's first ever bad bank. Indian version of bad bank would involve two entities. One is the National Asset Reconstruction Company Limited. The second is India Debt Resolution Company Limited. Now let us explore what National Asset Reconstruction Company Limited is. Now this has been already incorporated under the Companies Act, and what it does is it will acquire stressed assets worth about 2 lakh crore from all the banks in different phases. So it would try to purchase assets, stressed assets that these commercial and public sector banks have, and they would try to get them or collect those assets through different mechanisms in place. Now let us come back to the Indian Debt Resolution Company Limited. Now again, this has also been set up. What they'll try to do is whatever the assets, whatever the stressed assets that National Asset Reconstruction Company Limited collected, accumulated or purchased, the Indian Debt Resolution Company will try to sell those stressed assets in the market. So one would do the job of collecting in a phased manner. The second would do the job of selling those stressed assets in the market. These two combined, the National Asset Reconstruction Company Limited combined with the Indian Debt Resolution Company forms the whole structure of bad bank in India. So now let us explore a bit into how the NARCL, IDRCL work. So in the first phase, the NARCL will purchase bad loans from banks, right? It would be any loan that has gone bad, NARCL would purchase that loan from that commercial or that bank. Now what it will do is, it will pay 15% of agreed price in cash, right? They'll try to purchase, they won't pay the whole loan amount, but they'll try to, let us say there is a loan of outstanding of 10 lakhs. What NARCL will try to do is, they'll try to purchase that loan for a set period. Let us say they'll purchase it for 7 lakhs. What NARCL will do is, they'll pay 15% of those 7 lakhs in cash and remaining 85% in the form of security receipts. That is how NARCL would purchase bad loans from banks. And when NARCL completes its transaction, that loan is given to IDRCL. IDRCL, what is the role of IDRCL? IDRCL role is simply to sell those stressed assets in the market. Now, when the assets are sold, the commercial banks will be paid back the rest. So that is how this functioning is. And you might get a doubt here. What if IDRCL fails to sell that bad loan? Now when IDRCL is unable to sell the bad loan or has to sell it at a loss, let us say they have to take a hit, let us say they paid 7 lakhs but they are forced to sell it for 6 lakhs, they are taking a 1 lakh hit. What happens in that case is, in those cases the government is government will be giving a guarantee, and that guarantee will be invoked, and whatever the difference that there exists between that transaction, the government is going to pay. How are they going to pay that? They are going to pay that from the money that they'll raise. Through that raised money, they are going to pay that difference. So there are certain safety mechanisms inherently in this structure that ensures that the loss stays minimal. But again, nothing is guaranteed in this sense. So the process is simple. NARCL will purchase it. It will pay 15% in advance. The rest of 85% will be through security receipts, and IDRCL will sell those assets. If they are taking a loss or if they are unable to sell it at all, the government they are going to invoke a government guarantee, which ensures that the difference between what the commercial bank was supposed to get and what the bad bank was able to raise will be paid from the 30,600 crore that has been provided from the government. This is kind of the safety valve mechanism that this system has. Now one more thing that we have to clear up is, will bad bank actually work? Will it try to address the NPA issue? First, let us see what is the case here. You have commercial banks with bad loans, bad assets. What NARCL is essentially doing is, it is taking off those bad loans from the books of those banks. As soon as those loans are taken off, their books becomes less stressed, meaning their finances become less stress. So they are taking away the toxic of like the negative assets that these banks have, and they are providing one way to make profits on those things at a faster turnaround time. And even if the money is recovered, then it is again paid back to the bank itself. That is the mechanism, and that means that the bank's position becomes stronger and they can start lending again, right? Banks function on the premise of lending more and collecting more. That is how banks make profit. Because of these NPAs, they are taking a hit. What NARCL and IDRCL will do is, they'll take that negative out of the bank's equation and bank's book, ensuring that there is a fresh flow of money into the bank itself. And when you look at the government and the taxpayer point of view, see, it becomes a little bit unclear as to how the government is going to negotiate that difference when and if it arises, how much money is going to be put up by the government to ensure that that difference is cleared. But again, a lot of things have to be clarified at this point of time. And until and unless this thing kicks into realization and reality, uh, until and unless we have some data as to how much the government is putting up, how much of money is coming from taxpayers' pocket, how much of money the government is eating up, or the loss the government is trying to eat up from this entire enterprise, nothing can be said. But as far as right now, though the process looks clear, there are some unanswered questions in terms of how much of money is going to be spent from the government pocket, that is taxpayer money. So that is the outstanding issue in this regards. So this is what NARCL and IDRCL are. This is what the bad bank is. That is how the government is trying to end this NPMS that banks in India are since 2008, incrementally and sharply arose in 2016. Now moving on to the next article, AUKUS seeks to reshape Indo-Pacific ties. Yesterday we discussed this article in a little bit of detail, and at the top of the article I mentioned how France is very agitated by this recent development. So let us discuss a bit more into the significance and the impact of this trilateral partnership is going to have on individual countries. So let us start with the trilateral grouping itself, right? You have Australia, you have UK and the United States. Now they have announced that they are forming a new security alliance that they intend to use to help Australia acquire nuclear powered submarines. Yesterday we discussed what are the advantages of nuclear submarines. They can stay underwater for long periods of time. They don't need to surface as conventional diesel electric submarines, and the area or the amount of time that they can spend in sea for surveillance or for whatever activity goes drastically up in case if it is a nuclear submarine. So the idea is that the AUKUS grouping is going to ensure Australia acquire its first nuclear powered submarine fleet. Now let us come back to the US itself. Now let us start why US is shifting its focus. See, the idea of a shift of focus from Middle East to Asia, particularly Indo-Pacific region, has its initial ideas in during Barack Obama administration, right? 10 years back when Obama was president, he started discussing, or he started floating this idea, his administration started floating this idea that US is going to shift its focus from West Asia or conflicts in West Asia to Indo-Pacific region. That is why we are seeing the Afghan thing happening, the Iraq war ending, and subsequently America is also pulling out of many security kind of scenarios that they are stuck in West Asian region. Now, though this started 10 years back, President Barack Obama couldn't achieve those things. Though he set things in motion, when Biden became the president, Trump era, that's an entire thing. But nonetheless, whatever the ideas that Obama had, now they are being realized during Biden presidency. Now, we know that there is a lot of tension between countries in this region and China. The tensions are incrementally growing up with no sight or end in sight of finding some sort of a compromise or a cool off period between China and countries in the region, including US. We also discussed what were the outstanding issues, that South China Sea, the animosity or the antipathy that China has towards Japan, Taiwan and Australia, given Australia's start of or requesting of an independent inquiry into the origins of COVID-19. We also discussed that. This is where the US interests come from. Obama wanted to shift US strategic focus from West Asian conflicts to Indo-Pacific region. During Trump era, though it started, Biden completed the transformation of shifting of focus from West Asian conflicts into Indo-Pacific region. What was the action? Withdrawal of troops from Afghanistan and the end of conflict in Iraq too. Remember, Iraq thing is still going on, so that is also one thing. So America is shifting its focus. From this is from the American standpoint of view. What about Britain in this grouping? Right, when this announcement was made, when this security trilateral agreement or grouping was or alliance was announced, none of the leaders mentioned China by name. Right, yesterday I told you America only made this kind of an agreement with other countries 70 years back with China. With UK. They shared the nuclear propulsion technology with Britain. After that, they didn't do it with anybody else. Second thing, post Brexit, Britain has been left with an need to reassert itself as a global power, right? Because leaving the EU made Britain a less of an however you put it, but they are kind of lost in the world order. They are trying to find their own space in the global order post Brexit. That is why the Britain are very much excited and interested to join this alliance. This gives them a scope to enter the Indo-Pacific domain. Earlier they had to enter through India or through other kinds of means, but not on their own. But this grouping allows Britain to enter this domain in a big way. It is like they are finding their foothold in this region. This is also their tilt towards Indo-Pacific region. They are also trying to upgrade their naval fleet, preparing themselves for their foray into Indo-Pacific region. This is UK's interest in this grouping. Now let us come to Australia. Right, under this agreement, Australia is going to build at least 8 nuclear powered submarines. How are they going to build it? They are going to build using US expertise in that domain. What happened here was, prior to this, Australia made an agreement or a contract with France to purchase diesel electric conventional submarines which ran into billions of dollars. Right, the price for those contract was billions of dollars. Now what Australia essentially had done is they reneged on that agreement. Right, they said that we are going to end our contract with France, meaning they didn't sign an agreement with France, but nonetheless the France state-owned majority DCNS, which is also building submarines for Indian Navy, now the Australian government is saying that we would end our contract to purchase conventional diesel electric submarines from France. As I said, these nuclear submarines would allow Australia to conduct longer patrols in the region and also will give strong military presence in the region. So that is the intent. And what was the fallout of this agreement or this alliance? The agreement for building conventional diesel electric submarines that Australia had with France is going to be nixed. Right, that is one thing. Second, Australian Prime Minister has also called leaders of both India and Japan to explain the new alliance. Right, we already have they are already a part of, right, both Japan and India are part of the Quad along with the US. That is why he kind of made them aware of why they are doing it and appraised them of the new alliance also. So that is a different issue altogether. Now let us come to France. When you have a contract that is worth tens of billions of dollars ended because America is supplying you with the technology to build your own nuclear powered submarines, which are far more effective, which are far more advanced, which are far more capable than what you are supplying to the Australians, it is understandable that France is furious. Since this announcement came, the statements coming out of the French government are actually really good. They are sometimes funny too, but nonetheless they are very furious and they are demanding explanations from all sides. They want an explanation from Australian government, they want an explanation from the American side, they want an explanation from the US, and they are asking for explanation from all sides. They even went on to make a statement that it was really a stab in the back. We built a relationship of trust with Australia, and this trust was betrayed. So this is a significant development in this regards, where France is really furious about this development. They are not against the grouping, they are not against the security alliance. What they are against is the cancellation of the contract, which is worth tens of billions of dollars, where the French owned, majority owned company is going to build 12 world's largest conventional submarines to Australia. Now that contract is gone. So this is why the French are furious about this entire thing. Now there is this other country called New Zealand. New Zealand is a neighbor to Australia, right? New Zealand has always been a part of the security matrix of Australia and also America. Earlier they were part of this similar grouping where you had Australia, US and New Zealand. Now New Zealand has been left out of this grouping. Instead of New Zealand you have UK. Why New Zealand was left out of this grouping? New Zealand has been left out because of its nuclear free policy, where you had the Prime Minister of New Zealand coming out and saying that if Australia acquires its nuclear submarines, they are not welcome. The nuclear submarines are not welcome inside New Zealand waters, is what she was saying. But nonetheless, their policy has been of nuclear free policy, where they banned nuclear powered ships, nuclear power submarines entering their ports and so on and so forth. Though New Zealand and America share a warm relationship, one of the sticking points between both of their engagements and relation is New Zealand's stance on nuclear powered ships or nuclear policy, nuclear free policy to be very specific. So this is the development that has happened. So yesterday we discussed what the grouping would do. Now we know why or what are the stakes that are involved for each country in that grouping, including France and New Zealand. So this is the new security trilateral alliance that Australia, UK and US formed in the Indo-Pacific region. So moving on to the next article, Australia, UK, US pact will undermine regional peace. So as expected, China reacted or responded to this new security trilateral alliance by saying that this grouping would undermine regional peace and intensify an arms race in the region. Right, they were saying that export of highly sensitive nuclear submarine technology to Australia by US and UK proves once again that they are using nuclear exports as a tool for geopolitical game and adopting double standards, and this is extremely irresponsible. This was the statement from the Chinese envoy, and he questioned Australia on whether they are serious about fulfilling its nuclear non-proliferation commitments. Again, this is a criticism from the Chinese side. You take however you wish it to be, but nonetheless that alliance is going to go ahead, and they are going to ensure that Australia is equipped with nuclear submarines, nuclear powered submarines to be specific. As far as how Indian officials are, right, Indian officials pointing out that Beijing itself is a part of number of similar groupings, right? They are saying that Quad is doomed to fail. This is not something new, right? When Quad formed recently also, or I think yesterday it was, Beijing came out and said that Quad is doomed to fail, right? They were criticizing of India and other countries of trying to change the status quo in the region by forming alliances and groupings against Chinese growth and Chinese expansion. Now this is again interesting development nonetheless, but China is again what you call very unhappy with this alliance, but nonetheless we will see what kind of an impact that it would have in the region. Thank you, stay safe, namaste.
বৰঠাকুৰ IAS একাডেমি প্ৰস্তুতি আৰু অধ্যয়নৰ নিৰ্ভৰযোগ্য ঠিকনা। Borthakur IAS Academy।